Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the Underworld. The Star Wars Underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The Underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the Underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun, and it's all-round good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
Woo! I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
Why am I not in the intro? I gotta come up with a snappy line.
What's up, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. We are your source for the latest breaking Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion each and every week. And on this week's show, we're going to be breaking down all the big changes coming to Disney's Galaxy's Edge in California. But first, we'll be discussing the big breaking news, officially confirming some earlier reports that the leadership is changing over at Lucasfilm. And if we have time, we'll answer some SWU questions at the end of the show as well. My name is Chris, and joining us is my good friend, Mr. Dominic Jones.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Ben. Hello, everybody. Yes, I think I like everybody, or like a lot of people, I spent this week in anticipation, waiting for something to happen, waiting for an announcement to come. So you can imagine my frustration that Kyle Tucker still hasn't signed with an MLB team yet. We need him to just get this free agency going. Need him to sign. We know it's going to be Los Angeles, New York, or Toronto. Just pick one. And when I say pick one, I do mean pick Toronto. But it was a nice, pleasant distraction to find out that Dave Filoni's the new president of Lucasfilm. That's pretty fun. Somebody that I think we can say has been on this show. We interviewed him at New York Comic Con 11 years ago. So that, we could say we interviewed the new president of Lucasfilm. That's something. I don't know if we'll ever get to interview him again. I have a feeling not, but it's exciting times and lots to look forward to talk about. And also there's this interview that Kathleen Kennedy did with Deadline that is wild. And I look forward to getting into that as well. So it's going to be a great show regardless of what happens in Major League Baseball free agency.
I feel like I remember directly asking Lucasfilm after that interview, or maybe even while you were doing the interview. Although if I was there, then I might have been filming it. I can't remember. So it was after. Like, are we ever going to be able to do this again? And Lucasfilm was like, yes. I don't know.
It's been 84 years.
I was like, I knew that like this might be the last opportunity we get to do this. So let me ask. Yeah. And it was.
Yeah, our one and only interview.
That was hilarious.
Like all things Star Wars Rebels.
That's right. Also joining us, it's Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
How's it going, everybody? Yes, some very surprising news, very, very timely. Thank you for giving us the first scoop or the first podcast probably to talk about this. But honestly, I was really disappointed by this news, to be honest, because the first thing that I heard was that a president had stepped down and that he'd been replaced by Dave Filoni. And I thought, oh my gosh, Dave Filoni is president of the United States. Yes. But then I was disappointed. But this is the second. This is pretty good too. It's pretty good too.
Oh my gosh. That's funny. That's really, really funny. I think a lot of people did. That's like half the comments were saying that.
The only ice Dave Filoni supports is that at PPG Arena, which is where the Pittsburgh Penguins play.
There you go.
Oh my goodness.
There you go.
Oh my goodness. Also joining us.
I mean, the ice where they skate. That's the ice I'm talking about, not the fascists.
That that was clear, at least to me.
Okay,
It was
good,
clear.
good.
Yes, if anyone's watching, they can see the ice references of that kind that you're wearing. Yes. Also joining us, initially being here to break down the Galaxy's Edge news, but now unexpectedly also here to talk about the less important president change news from Ion Candidates, our good buddy Joel Davis. Welcome to the show, Joel.
I'm glad to be here. I've been watching the news. You know, the coup at Lucasfilm has been intense. You know, you got the guards running through. You got a big civil war. We got this faction. Oh wait, no, that's all just YouTube grifting. My bad. No, I was here to talk about theme parks. I was promised theme park discussion because you and me are two people who live 30 minutes by that park. But no, I am excited to talk about this as well. It's both unsurprising and surprising at the same time. That's what it's
Yeah. Do you guys remember, like, we've been around for a while, as has Dave Filoni. Do you remember, like, the first time you became aware of this guy who was, at the time, what was it? His title was supervising director of the Clone Wars. Do you guys like?
I think I do.
I'm trying to think back. Joel, what's your earliest memory of Dave?
I think my earliest memory has to be I did watch the Clone Wars behind the scenes videos on Lucasfilm.com back in the ye old days. Back when it was on Cartoon Network, and I watched it as a little boy at 8:30 at night on Fridays. I also remember having the Clone Wars movie DVD that I watched a lot of the behind the scenes because I wanted to know about the show. I just saw Filoni appear. I didn't know who he was. I just okay, just person. Like I knew where's George? Like that's the person I always wanted to listen to. But that was the only person I knew. Like okay, all these other people are important. Just George. That was me back then. But I always saw him. So okay, he's always talking about stuff. And that's kind of how I was aware of him. I wasn't aware of there was this whole persona around him until years later when I kept hearing people oh, this guy hates the EU and he's destroying the EU, and he kind of was the target of those people for years. And then obviously just familiarity and all that stuff. So it's it's kind of more of an amorphous kind of knowing of him than just remembering one single day. Oh, that guy.
Yeah, he didn't show up at your house one day, be like, "Hello, it's me. I'm Dave Filoni."
That would have been awesome.
Hey, well, I still wait for that day to happen. I'm still dreaming that one day there'll be a knock at the door.
Could happen any day now. Any day now.
Yeah, it won't be somebody asking me to sign a petition. It'll be a Dave. It'll be like, I'm here to show you the Mandalorian and Grogu or something. I don't know. Ben, Chris, do you guys have any early memories of Filoni? Thinking back now that he's the guy. He's always been the guy, but he's the guy now.
So I don't remember the first time I ever heard his name or heard him talk or any of that, because he always seemed as soon as, kind of similar to Joel, as soon as I was paying any attention to the Clone Wars, he just was all over any information about that, interviews and documentaries and whatever. So it was probably around the time that the Clone Wars was about to come out or had come out that that I would have first heard about him. But what comes to my mind anytime that he's promoted, because he's been promoted quite a few times since then, and so it's come to my mind again, was my first interaction with him. And so what happened was that my first celebration I went to with my mom and my sister. This was in 2012 when it was in Orlando. This is the first time that I met you, Dominic, at that convention. We knew each other online and been doing the podcast. Was the first time I actually met you in person. And I met a lot of people in person for the first time at that convention, including Dave Filoni. And the way that it happened was me and my mom and my sister were just walking out of the convention center for the day after the first or second day or something of the convention center, going back to our hotel. And Dave Filoni was just standing outside the convention center talking to a few people. It wasn't a big crowd of people like it probably would be now. It was just maybe 3 or 4 people. They were just hanging out on a sidewalk talking. And of course, I knew who he was, My sister knew who he was. I'm not sure. I think my mom kind of sort of knew who he was. Or maybe I said, hey, you know who that is or something. And so, you know, I walk up to him. I cannot remember anything that I said at all. I probably just said like, hi, I love the Clone Wars or something like that.
Right.
But what I remember happening was I remember him, it kind of coming up that, you know, my mom had brought me and my sister to our first Star Wars celebration. And Dave Filoni started talking to my mom. And what he said to her was, thank you so much for supporting your kids' passions and bringing them to this convention.
Mm.
Wow.
And
that's cool.
So that like is the reason why amongst all of the many amazing things that Dave Filoni has made in Star Wars, that's why I'm the biggest Dave Filoni fan, because I'm a fan of him as a person, because the fact that he said that, and that was the type of interaction that was my first interaction with him, was like so wholesome that it just like, I've always had such a respect for who he is as a person since then. And so that moment came to my head. That was the first thing that came to my head, you know, as it does every time he's promoted. But once again, when this was announced, I was brought back to that time. Ooh, interesting. we got something for the show. So yeah, I was just brought back to that time. And so I'm so happy. I'm so happy that that guy who thanked my mom for bringing me and my sister to our first celebration 14 years ago is now in charge of Lucasfilm. Like, so awesome.
Yeah, that's really great. That's always been, I think, something that Dave does really well is he understands what people need to hear in the moment, and whether that's you know, a young fan, an older fan, someone who's only kind of interested. It's you rarely hear a story about a negative face-to-face interaction with the man, and I think that's a testament to who he is, and that is you know, an important part of leadership. You know, that we you know, joke about presidents, but like that's something that leaders are good at, which is making people feel heard and having real conversations with them. Ben, I want to hear from you. Do you have an early Dave Filoni memory?
Yeah, see that I'm kind of in the same boat with Joel here. Like I don't remember the first time I heard the name Dave Filoni, obviously. I imagine back in the day, I religiously checked. Like I would get up in the morning. This is kind of late, like early, like teenager 8 years for me. Like when I actually had a computer and had internet access like regularly. Before that, I really didn't. And I would get up in the morning and check StarWars.com for what the latest Star Wars news. I didn't know what a podcast was. I wasn't online that much other than that. And I knew that the Clone Wars movie was coming. I knew all that. I followed the release of The Force Unleashed. You know, all that stuff was happening that day. So I'm sure at some point Dave Filoni saw an interview, maybe picked up an issue of Star Wars Insider, because it did that too back in the day. But it wasn't until like going to Star Wars Celebration 2015, Anaheim, and being up basically for 24 hours that first day, and being in line and going to the Force Awakens panel and trying to go home because I was dead. And my dad's with me. He's like, no, let's go back in for a minute. Let's just go back inside for a minute. I'm like, okay, all right. You're going to drag me back into the Star Wars Wonderland. Okay, I can't really argue with you. And lo and behold, Filoni was there. He was just walking the floor. And again, I don't remember. It was just like, like just something. I don't know what I possibly could have said to him. I hazard to even think back to that. But it was amazing to like something that he definitely does not do anymore, which is like walk the floor and get out there with his cowboy hat, not undercover, but like out there as a fan. I think that's the amazing thing about Filoni, is that he was going to Star Wars Celebration dressed in his Plo Koon costume as a fan. like the guy things, and he thought it was a joke when he actually got the job. He thought it was his Avatar coworkers were pranking him when he actually got the call from Lucasfilm to go things. And so I think it's the ultimate success story. Honestly, it's the ultimate, like, we're in this era where Star Wars is being run by the fans. Star Wars previously was made by people that grew up in a world without Star Wars or created Star Wars, like George Lucas. Now we're truly in the era of just like people that grew up in Star Wars, that love Star Wars, that are fans of Star Wars, now are not only making it but in charge of making it. And I think Filoni there's a lot said about Filoni. There's been a lot said about Dave Filoni for many, many years. And I think, I don't know, I think I get that impression too. It's just like, he's a good guy. He's just a good guy. And he's a great storyteller. I've loved his stories. And I really wish him the best at this point, because I think he's got a lot ahead of him. He's got a big job to do. And yeah, they're not going to let him hear the end of this. So good luck, Dave.
Yeah. For me, like I actually think I became aware of Filoni not through StarWars.com and not through Clone Wars bonus features, but through podcasts. Because back in the day, once or twice a season, Dave would go on what was at the time the biggest Star Wars podcast, and he would just talk about the show and talk about what they were doing. He would go back over the previous season. He would tease what was to come in the next season or the next half of the season. And it was these really like in-depth, fascinating interviews that honestly still hold up to this day for a project that I've been working on and nobody's ever going to see, at least not for a very long time. I've gone back and listened to some of those, and they are just as good now as they are, or as they were back then. If anything, they're actually kind of more interesting now with the perspective of where we've come in the years since then. I linked in the chat the interview that I did with Dave at New York Comic Con 2015. That interview still holds up, and it has nothing to do with me. It's entirely to do with Dave. And so, I think doing that for people of our vintage, we have this image of him as someone who is maybe a little bit more approachable, maybe a little bit more down to earth, maybe a little bit more connected with the fans than people who are coming in now or who have come in the last 10 years, because those interviews don't happen as much. And when they do, they're a little bit more, not scripted. Scripted's the wrong word, but there's more restrictions on what can and can't be talked about. And that's why I think, like, when Disney Gallery was out and there was that clip that went viral, and it goes viral every, once a year or so, of Dave talking about the Duel of the Fates, talking about the end of the Phantom Menace. And he just goes into it and like what Qui-Gon is thinking, what Maul is thinking, what they each represent, how it like speaks to the entire story of Star Wars comes down to that fight. I think it blows people's minds because they're just not aware of that he's capable of this depth. But for us, I look at that and I go, oh yeah, that's just Dave being Dave. Like, it almost didn't feel special because I'm like, oh yeah, that's just what he does. That's how he does this. And he used to be able to do this like at celebration panels and all that stuff. My Dave Filoni story, the first time I met Dave was also at Celebration 6 in 2012. I had been to Celebration 5 2 years prior in 2010. I'd been to a lot of Dave Filoni panels, but I'd never seen. I never actually got to meet him. I never actually crossed paths with him. I felt like I was the only one that didn't. And at C6, I remember it was very similar to your story, Chris. And may well have been the same day, just like 20 minutes later, because it was also.
I think it was. Yeah. I remember we were sharing the stories with each other after they happened, and I think we figured out it was like one sequentially right after the other.
Yeah, so we were leaving. I was driving out. I'd road tripped down from Toronto to Orlando for that convention, and I'd brought with me my brother and my friends Gabriel and Daniel. Dan, who made the Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy intro, and they at the time did not know who Dave Filoni was. They didn't know who he was prior to getting to Celebration, and then we went to these Celebration panels, and they were wowed by him and wowed by what he represented and the way he talked about Star Wars. And as we're leaving, I think Dan goes, hey, we're in the van, we're leaving, and Dan goes, hey, there's that Filoni guy with the cowboy hat. He's right over there. And he was like, he had like migrated away from the exit door where you saw him, Chris, to somewhere a little bit further along. And we realize he's outside on the phone, kneeling down and writing stuff. And if you're watching live, you can actually see a picture of this, and you'll understand why as go further into the story. I did not take this picture, by the way. So we get out of the car, we go over, we're sort of waiting for Dave, and he's on the phone. And Joel Aaron, who was the lighting supervisor on the Clone Wars and a lot of Star Wars projects, he's there. He's saying hello. He's the one who took this picture of Dave taking notes. Dave's assistant, I think her name was Megan. She was there as well. And so we're just, we're chatting to them. We're waiting for Dave. And at first I see Dave. He's on the phone. He's writing notes. I'm like, this guy is the king of Star Wars Celebration. What he's doing right now is getting directions to the hottest after party in all of Orlando. Like he's getting directions. And then but this phone call keeps going on. And I'm like, where the hell is this? Where's this restaurant or nightclub? Where are they all going? Where are all the Lucasfilm people and the cool people? Where are they going? And then I'm not going to listen in. But you pick up like words as you hear somebody on the phone. And I hear things like, yeah, we'll get that down in the edit. Yeah, someone tell Matt Mitchell to rewrite that scene. Okay, yeah, we'll take a look at that when we're back. And I'm like, oh my God, he's on a work call right now. He's talking about the Clone Wars. Who could it be that he's talking to? It could only be one person. The maker himself, George Lucas. So we're standing there joking, that he's on the phone with George, and we've all seen Fanboys, right? So we're like, well, I can hear his beard. We're doing that a little bit. And Dave gets off the phone. He comes over to say hello, and my brother says to him, he goes, "Is that George you were talking to?" And David goes, well, I couldn't possibly say. Just does that little Filoni thing. So we get our moment with Dave, and we have a really nice time. It's the same thing. He was making jokes. He was cracking jokes. We told how we road trip down there. Whole thing. It was really fun. Super lovely. We leave. Enjoy the rest of Star Wars Celebration. Come home, StarWars.com. Dave posts his recap of Star Wars Celebration, where this picture is posted on StarWars.com. And he does confirm that, yes, he was indeed on the phone with George Lucas the entire time. And we were just standing there like, I wonder who he's talking to. George. And George was coming 2 days later. It wasn't like he didn't know where Dave was, and he just still called him and said, I got notes.
Oh man. It's interesting when you bring up, I'm having all these memories from 2012 now. A lot of people have talked about how Dave Filoni is George's apprentice, his Padawan, and he's the rightful heir to Star Wars because of how much time they spent together and all this stuff. And there's a literal metaphorical thing that happened a few days after this, where when George did come to that celebration, he came by kind of crashing a panel that Dave Filoni was on. And walking out unexpectedly. And when that happened, I don't know, I can't remember how this happened, but at some point, he ended up with that hat that Dave Filoni's wearing in this photo. He ended up with that hat on his head. And George Lucas is wearing Dave Filoni's hat, and Dave Filoni is looking not like Dave Filoni without his hat, totally incognito, unrecognizable. And then at some point, I've never thought about it until now, because I've always thought about how funny it was that George is wearing Dave Filoni's hat. But I've never thought about, at some point, George would have had to take the hat off and give it back to him. And so now I've thought, almost like George Lucas taking the hat off and giving it back to him is symbolic of what happened. And it just took 14 years.
I think it's funny. I think it's also a good reminder of just how much George was involved with Clone Wars. We always talk about Clone Wars is Dave's show and whatnot. And I'm like, it really is George and Dave's show. And, it was always sad when it was, of course, canceled. But there is always, the logical part of your brain that's even if they continued, it would have been very different without George and his pushing the ideas and boundaries and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like, actually, in fact, I'll just give one more interview thing that I remember because I've been recapping it. You know the episode where Cad Bane is gonna taking the Jedi babies and they go to Mustafar? Remember that episode?
Oh yeah.
Children of the Force.
Well, here's an example of how Clone Wars is very much George's. A lot of the ideas still come from George. When George is like, "Hey, let's go to Mustafar," that'd be cool. Dave was like, "I don't know, George. Isn't Mustafar like kind of sacred cow till Revenge of the Sith? Should Anakin even go there?" And George like, sure, it's cool. I don't care. They have another base on there anyway.
You gotta love George. George was never precious with this stuff. I think that's this part of what made Clone Wars. It's part of the secret sauce of Clone Wars. But yeah, Dave Filoni is the new president. He's been around for a long time, and as we just told with all of our stories, we'll talk more about what this means for the future of Lucasfilm in a moment. But I think we've gone long enough without plugging anything. So Chris, over to you. Let's do
I forgot
beginning of the show, quote unquote. Plugs.
I thought this is one of these shows without plugs because that does happen from time to time. All right. I'm going to break a record for how fast I do this. Follow us on social media at the SWU. Join our Discord. Link is in the description. Subscribe and review if you're listening to us on a podcast catcher. If you super chat, we'll mention you on the show. You can also become a channel member if you're not live. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Boom.
All right. So we basically talked about this last week, that this was imminent, and but they made it official today, literally about 3-4 hours before we started recording. The headline on StarWars.com: Lucasfilm and the Walt Disney Studios announce leadership transition. The story goes like this. Lucasfilm announced today that after 14 years of leading the studio, President Kathleen Kennedy is stepping down from her role. Kennedy will return to full-time producing, including the studio's upcoming feature films, The Mandalorian and Grogu, and Star Wars Starfighter. Dave Filoni, who worked closely with Star Wars creator George Lucas to build the Lucasfilm animation department on Star Wars The Clone Wars and helped launch Star Wars live-action series alongside Jon Favreau on The Mandalorian, will take on creative leadership of the company as president and chief creative officer, and Lin-Wyn Brennan will serve as co-president. Their close collaboration and more than 30 years of combined senior executive experience will carry Lucasfilm into its next chapter of storytelling with a strong foundation of creative vision and operational leadership guiding the studio forward. I love how StarWars.com will go from just like the most like fan, like, hey, here's how you make Grogu out of construction paper, to then having this like business shit on the website of like corporate speak. But it's official. We all kind of talked about it last week, Ben and Chris. So Joel, I'm going to throw to you. Just give us your immediate reaction to this news.
Not surprised. This has been pretty much in the works, quite frankly, I think since 2023. When Dave got the CCO position, and I'm like, yeah, he's been probably being groomed by Kathleen Kennedy for a while to be the successor. And my kind of three thoughts are: one, I doubt anything's gonna dramatically change in the short and midterm, because it's just someone who's already in position of leadership just kind of taking on the reins. And also two, Dave at the cynical side of me is like, Dave could be the greatest president ever. He's still at the behest of the Bobs. I feel like everyone's frozen.
Yeah.
And or maybe that's just me. And what was my third thing? And my third thing is, everyone who's like, oh, it should be Tony Gilroy, it should be Jon Favreau. I'm like, guys, that being a good writer and director kind of have nothing to do with being a good studio head. Like, they really don't. James Gunn is a writer-director, yes, and I'm glad he's the CEO of DC. I think, but that doesn't necessarily mean he was qualified to be the studio head. Kevin Feige isn't a writer-director. He's just a producer. He's not actually writing and directing those Marvel movies. Most studio heads are not writer-directors. Although I think some of the Pixar people are, and maybe the DC animation studios are. So, but that the two things do not equate. That kind of leadership does not equate to being a good studio head, that you have to manage people. Now, whether or not Filoni's like secretly super nitpicky about what is and isn't Star Wars, and like the rumors of he hates Andor, blah blah blah, I don't know, but we'll find out in a couple of years. But my point is, yeah, this all makes sense. And for all the grifters out there, Kathleen Kennedy, when she took over from Lucas, when Disney bought it, she didn't have to keep Dave around. When they ended Clone Wars, she could have been like, "Thank you, Dave, for your services at Clone Wars. We've had fun. Go now, do other animated stuff." But she kept him. She let Ryan and JJ and Gareth with the live action stuff. She promoted him to the chief creative officer, and now she made him the president. So we owe Dave's ride to Kathleen Kennedy, maybe even more than George Lucas, quite frankly, if you ask me. So yeah, those are all my thoughts in one big ramble.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's clearly been something that's been happening for a while. I think you hit on something interesting there, Joel. I also, when Disney bought Lucasfilm, and one of the first things they did was end the Clone Wars. I remember thinking like, oh, is this the end of Dave? Like, is he gonna go and make, the next Avatar show? Is he gonna go and do his own thing at some point? Is this it? And I thought it'd be a real shame to lose him. And he did take a little bit of a backseat for a few years, with Rebels, not necessarily, and this isn't a comment on the quality, just on its visibility was kind of the secondary thing compared to the movies, and then to see him reemerge around 2018 2019 as Jon Favreau's creative partner on The Mandalorian, suddenly it was like, oh no, this guy is being set up for greatness, for whatever the next thing is. And I think it was very, very telling that at Celebration Japan last year, the Mandalorian and Grogu panel began with the Starfighter announcement, and it was Dave and Kathy together making that announcement. Favreau was not on the stage. Pedro Pascal was not on the stage. No one else from the Mandalorian and Grogu was a part of that. It was the present of Lucasfilm in Kathleen Kennedy and the future of Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni. I think it was, one, it set Dave up to be her successor. Two, it showed that this was a shared vision between the two of them. So it wasn't going to be, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, a turf war when somebody took over of like, oh, I didn't love that idea, that Starfighter idea from the Stranger Things guy with the with the Barbie and the Notebook dude in it. I'm not really vibing with it anymore. We'll just kind of bury it on Disney Plus. We'll give it the war between the land and the sea treatment for all of my Doctor Who fans out there.
I know what you mean.
We will. It wasn't going to be that. It was, they're both invested in this movie. They're both excited about it. And it will see, it will get its wide release, and it will have the full support of the current and past leadership at Lucasfilm. As I said, like last week we did talk, I think we talked a lot about Dave, and we've already talked a lot about Dave. I think it's worth taking a few minutes and talking about Kathy and talking about her legacy as president of Lucasfilm over the last 14 years. So Ben, I will toss to you. What is your view on the legacy of Kathleen Kennedy when it comes to Star Wars?
Yeah, because it's an interesting one, because Kathy comes in with, if she had decided in 2012 to be like, yep, I'm good, I'm going to retire, she still would have been regarded as like one of the greatest producers in Hollywood history. But then she went on and goes, oh yeah, I'm going to do a bunch of Star Wars movies and lead this company and take off and take on this role that George Lucas handpicked for her. And I think, it has not been without bumps in the road, obviously. But I think you could, I'm not saying I'm making this argument, but you could make the argument that Kathleen Kennedy had a better track record than George Lucas in making successful, beloved Star Wars projects. You could make that argument, because
I'd make that argument.
Obviously, because like there's more, and obviously it's an unfair comparison, because like there's more content that we got more content in the last 10 years than we did the first 30. And like, there is a big thing, but like I think she did an admirable job. It was not without mistakes, it was not without flaws, but she showed her stuff. And I think it proves that she's the right person for the job, that she was the right person to carry this franchise and the company through what was a tumultuous time, being in the fandom, being that this was the first time without George Lucas, George walking away and doing that, a tumultuous time in Hollywood, tumultuous time in the world, in history, and she pulled it through and made, in my opinion, some of the best Star Wars content and some of the best Star Wars stories that we've ever seen.
Okay.
Yes, agreed.
Yes.
Agreed. Ben, you did that thing where we thought you were going to say more, and then you stopped talking again.
I know my speech
I was like,
weird tonight.
I was ready for more. I was ready to continue the charge. Chris, over to you. Your thoughts on Kennedy's legacy.
Honestly, I feel like the only thing that's maybe not the best is like completely out of her control. Like I feel like we've gotten almost like two Star Wars universes while she's been in charge, that of the sequels and that of what's been on Disney Plus. And I feel like everything that's been on Disney Plus, and then some of the even stuff that has been in theaters outside of the sequels, like Rogue One, for example, has been absolutely fantastic and like some of the best Star Wars ever, and rivaling what Dave Filoni made prior to her coming on board and what George Lucas made. I think that her overseeing the sequels was very much like when Disney bought Star Wars. I mean, that was their intention. That's how they're going to make their money back. Like, we're going to buy Star Wars, and the first thing we're going to do is put out 3 sequel movies, and we're going to use that to get our investment money back as quickly as possible. And so I don't really blame her for the fact that it didn't really snowball into next generation of content fully. And that's really the only thing that I think has been a misstep in the Disney era. I think everything else has been fantastic. So with that being said, I think that she did an amazing job as president of Lucasfilm and an amazing job as producer for all these projects. And I obviously think it's very unfair that, people are going to blame her for all the things they don't like, but then not give her credit for the things they do, because very few people can say they didn't like anything that has happened over the last 14 years. So I think that was I think she did a great job. I don't think she could have done much better than she did. And I think that she leaves, having created as much good stuff as George Lucas did as head of the studio.
I want to add on that, Chris, because you brought up a point that has always been in my head. And I'm someone who likes the sequels. Like, I like all 3 of them. I like Rise of Skywalker, even though I know it's bad. But there is like this part of me that kind of has this vibe, and I can't prove it, that kind of deep down in their heart of hearts, one of the reasons Lucasfilm might not like the sequels compared to, say, Rogue One or even Solo, is I do think that the sequels are the most Disney mandated out of all the projects. Where it's like, if Lucasfilm had like complete free reign, no one told them to do anything, I think they would have loved to start with something like Rogue One or Solo or the Mandoverse or stuff like that. I think the sequels were very much part of the deal to like, okay, we buy Star Wars, we get a sequel trilogy, we want Han, Luke, and Leia back because that's what everybody wants, quite frankly, and they were right. They're right. And Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm kind of have to make the best out of this situation. I think they do it for 2 of them, but then you can kind of see the mandate problem where they, Rise of Skywalker has all the problems. Colin leaves. They have no idea, what that movie's going to be. They don't push it back to give them room to breathe. And it's sort of like, this is kind of like my secret of like, I feel like by the time they got to Rise of Skywalker, they were like, we're just done. We're just put it out there. We're moving on to the Mandoverse. We're done. We're over it. Mandoverse
like
is kind of
that.
what we want to do anyway. And they were just kind of like, okay, we're done. We'll maybe go back to Rey because we kind of like the character, even if we don't really care about anything else. And clearly they like Ben Solo. We know.
I was going to say, Ben. I was going to say, Joel. The one sort of hole in your theory there was just how far the hunt for Ben Solo got into development.
I think they like the characters. I just don't think they cared for how the movies were initially kind of forced upon them. And they kind of developed some aspects of liking parts of it. And I've always heard like conflict between JJ and Lucasfilm with Force Awakens, but we don't have to get into that. But but I do think, I think Kathleen Kennedy overall has done a great job kind of keeping the integrity of Lucasfilm intact as best she can out of her circumstances. Like she didn't cancel the Clone Wars because she hated it. She canceled it because Disney didn't want to pay the money, and also George left. So you kind of lose your big creative pulse for the Clone Wars. The Acolyte got canceled because they didn't want to do streaming and a bunch of other reasons. So I think she has handled it as best she could. And I think she has produced as much good Star Wars stuff as George, if not more, and probably stuff that's going to be as mainstream as his 6 movies and TV show. Her legacy is pretty great.
Yeah. I think obviously I think Kathleen Kennedy's great strength is is producing movies and producing shows, and she's been very, very successful at that with Lucasfilm. The proof is in the pudding. There's been far more hits than there have been misses in terms of critical response, in terms of audience response, and in terms of box office and streaming numbers. We can all sit here and debate which ones are the hits and which ones are the misses, but overall, I think we're going to largely come out with more hits than misses. Yes. What I think where Kathleen Kennedy's legacy, I think it's a little bit more complicated, is I think she wasn't great at managing up. Excuse me. She's very good at managing down. She's very good at getting the right people in place to make the movies and shows she wanted to make. I don't think she was as good at dealing with Disney. And that Hunt for Ben Solo story, I still see is like super eye-opening about things, because so many of the things that I think we've put on her over the years are actually things that were mandated to her by Iger, Bergman, Horn, all of the Chapek, like all of the various guys that have been the head of either Disney or Disney Studios. And that's where things get messy, and that's where only certain shows can get made, and the ones that do get made, if they are a little bit more challenging, like Acolyte, well, if they're not, if they aren't the mega hit that a Star Wars show is expected to be, they don't get the chance to grow the way a normal show would get a chance to grow. And I think maybe at times Kennedy might have approached some things like a normal movie or normal show, a big movie or show, when she needed to have a little bit more of a deft hand at dealing with the board, so to speak. Not to say that she was terrible at it by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that's where there might have been a bit of weakness, and that's where legacy gets a little bit more complicated, even though by and large I see it was very, very successful tenure.
It's hard to know. I was going to say, it's hard to know. I mean, this is similar to the comment that Din made. She fought for Gilroy Andor, which gave us the greatest work of pop art of this generation, which I definitely will agree with that. I think we know a bit about, and we're talking a bit about some of the things that, some of the losses, some of the things that where Disney got their way, and it was not good that they got their way. But also important to think about all the times that she was successful at convincing Disney to do something they didn't want to do, and she got it done anyway. And that's fantastic too. And we don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know like what the win-loss is on that, like of all the things that she went to war with Disney over, how many times she won, how many times she lost. We will never know the answer to that. But I think it's fair to say that there are moments where I think she did successfully manage up, just like there are moments where she didn't. And so I think that deserves a lot of credit too. And of course, she could have won a little bit more, but Yeah, is it realistic to imagine that she would win every debate with Disney over every single thing?
Brings up an interesting topic to be maybe this is actually kind of the one concern about Dave being the president, where I actually kind of agree with the concern, even though we have no proof of the pudding. You know, Kathleen Kennedy is a powerhouse in Hollywood. She's probably one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood. You know, she's been there for years. She's produced some of the biggest movies of our time. She's with George, you know, Steven Spielberg. You know, these are the old guard. You know, they're no longer the young rebel. They're the elite of Hollywood. They're the old guard of Hollywood now. Dave, we love Dave. He's a nice guy. But he's not a powerful Hollywood producer. He is the Star Wars guy. Not Ben Hart's Star Wars guy, but you know, he's the other Star Wars guy. You know, he has just done Star Wars. We don't know yet how Dave is going to handle those corporate boards, if he can, if he even likes doing that. Now, maybe that's what the co-president thing's for, and maybe she's more cutthroat than even Kathleen Kennedy is, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know. Lin-Wen, is that her name?
Lin-Wen, yeah, Lin-Wen Brennan.
Lin-Wen Brennan, you know, maybe she's more cutthroat and can handle Disney boards and stuff like that. But, you know, again, in Hollywood, clout is everything, you know, and Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger have been compatriots for generations at this point. We're like decades, you know, they're around the same age. You know, there's also a chance Bob Iger is about to retire this year, according to a lot of the same insiders who were saying Kathleen Kennedy, and got it right, by the way. So, you know, Dave might have to deal with a new CEO who might be a bit around his age. So maybe there's a bit more of an equality there. But, you know, as long as Iger is still there for how many months yet, you know, Dave is still kind of fresh blood, and Iger is, you know, kind of Hollywood royalty. So it's kind of like, is Dave going to be able to handle that part? That is, I think, a legit concern we can have. Or Lin-Wen, of course.
Yeah, that is. I think that's the big unknown of all this. Is what to expect from Lin-Wen Brennan. Obviously, a very, very, very accomplished person. She's just always been a behind the scenes person, and likely will remain that way. But yeah, that's the question, and I think her job is going to be to go into those rooms with the Disney board with, you know, that sort of irrefutable argument that this project that Chief Creative Officer Dave Filoni has decided upon is going to be the next Star Wars one, that Bob Iger, or whichever Bob replaces him, this is why you need to fund this project. This is why this project is going to work. This is why the demographics, blah, 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 and be able to go in there and fight for it. And as we've said, that's always easier said than done. And who knows how many fights were had and who, you know, which score, you know, who actually won in the end, who had the higher score of wins and losses between Kennedy and the Disney board. And
the thing too is, I think we've mentioned a lot, like, what are the things that Kathleen had that Dave doesn't have, but it's also fair to kind of reverse that and be like, what does Dave have that Kathleen doesn't have? And I think that the key thing there is, with Dave being the chief creative officer and being more from the creative side than the business side, he's going to come with an understanding of the material that Kathleen never would have had. I mean, I don't want to say that Kathleen Kennedy didn't understand Star Wars, because clearly she did. She was picked by George, not by Disney, to run things. But you got to think that somebody who's actually writing the material and directing the material has some level of understanding of it beyond the producer. And because it's coming from, he's the one that's just generating it. It's his ideas. It's coming out of his head. And so I've got to think that there's a difference between trusting a creative's idea versus trusting a producer's concept of a creator's idea. Because Kathleen can come and say, okay, I think this is a good idea, we should do this, or this is a bad idea, we shouldn't do this. But she's kind of looking at it as a business person, analyzing what has happened with different creators' works in the past. Whereas for Dave, it's straight creative intuition. It's like the same thing that is having him decide, this is the line that Ahsoka needs to say in this pivotal moment in this script, is the same. That's coming from the same place as, we need to do this movie, or maybe we shouldn't do this movie. Like, it's coming from the same sauce. And so you got to think that hopefully there will be a trust that the future or present CEO of Disney and the board of Disney and all these people that make the final decisions to greenlight or not. So hopefully there's going to be some level of trust that they have in Dave as a creative, to know that he's going to have a creative intuition that is going to be beyond just a business intuition about what the audience is going to resonate with, which I think gives him an advantage to maybe make up for some of the disadvantage of him not having that business experience.
I guess it all kind of depends on like what the CEOs even like, because like, you know, Dave can talk about all these great moral things, and then the CEO of Disney decides it's like, yeah, but where's all them laser swords and stormtroopers? We need some. We need them Wookiee people. We need the toys.
Well,
we need
and I think if we're talking about the differences between Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni, I think Kathleen Kennedy ultimately, I believe, is someone who is perhaps most comfortable on a movie set. She is most comfortable. She's most in her element doing behind the scenes stuff, making everything run as smoothly as possible, as producers do. Not to say that she didn't go out on stage and bring it when she was on things, but I don't think that was her specialty. I'm not going to say Filoni has always been the most comfortable, especially when there's an 8-year-old in the audience asking him a direct question about what happened to Ahsoka. But Filoni is a front man. Filoni is one for he loves. I think he does genuinely kind of love the attention. He loves playing with people's emotions. He loves not answering people's questions, and I think he's a pitch man. He is a man of the people. And as we were talking about earlier, he's a fan. He started in the audience himself, and now he's up on stage. So I think that's an interesting thing to come about. Of just like he's a creative. His weakness is that he doesn't have the producing power or the producing experience or even the directing experience, filmmaking experience that Kathleen Kennedy does. But he's got the storytelling down pat, and he is a showman. He is someone who can show up at Celebration and work a crowd. And you can imagine that also could translate into being able to work a boardroom or work CEO into saying yes to something maybe they would have said no to, pitching a project to somebody. I think Filoni is that guy. So I think it's very interesting to consider how that dynamic will be. Obviously, Lin-Manuel Brennan is going to play that part. It's going to be a huge part of that dynamic. But it is curious also that it's not two co-presidents. It's Dave Filoni, president and chief creative officer, and Lin-Manuel Brennan is the co-president. That distinction of just like they are partners, but Filoni is taking the lead here.
Like Filoni's president and chief creative officer. Lin-Manuel Brennan is co-president and general manager. So still pretty good title. Pretty good title.
Oh yeah, great title. Love the title. That's a killer title.
So well, I'm sure I have more to say about Dave and Lin-Manuel and the transition, if there really is one, over the next few weeks and months and years, I'm sure. But I want to take some time and take a look at this interview that Kathleen Kennedy did with Deadline. It's pitched as her exit interview, where she looks back on her time as head of Lucasfilm and also sort of gives some updates on what's going on with a lot of the projects, those that are in production, those that have been announced but we haven't heard anything about. One of those projects that is kind of conspicuous by its absence is the Rey movie. There's not a word said about it, but we can talk about that in a minute. I will say I love this interview because it's nice to hear from Kathleen Kennedy in a format like this, something that's more sit down. And it's something I wish she had done more of throughout her time as president of Lucasfilm, but also reading it, I kind of see why she didn't, because there's some interesting things that are said that I don't know if the PR team at Lucasfilm would totally love. But we'll start with what is on everybody's mind, which is Star Wars Starfighter, of course. Yeah, the next Star Wars movie after The Mandalorian and Grogu. Here's what Kathleen Kennedy said about that. She says, quote, "It was envisioned as a single film. Sean Levy just made the experience so pleasant for everybody, and we found this 14-year-old kid out of Ireland who had virtually no experience. That's always risky, hanging a story so much on a child actor. You're not exactly sure how comfortable they're going to be. Flynn Gray turned out to be such a special kid. When you cast kids, a lot of it becomes about the parents. He has great parents, and we got lucky there too. Not only was he there with Ryan Gosling, this movie is structured in a way that he had kind of a new actor coming in every few weeks that he was one-on-one with. Matt Smith, Amy Adams, Aaron Pierre, and each one, it was so great to watch him because he would just get so excited by the actors he was working with. It was like he was in the best university you could possibly be in. They circle back a few questions later to more about Starfighter and the possibility of it being of it getting sequels, of it becoming the first in a series. She says, quote, "With Sean's movie, this could go on, but it's not our intention right now. We really made the movie as a standalone story, but you cannot ignore the fact that this young actor is so good. I will be very surprised if he doesn't go on and we don't try to see if there might be future stories. But it was just kind of nice not going into this and not having to think that way. We could just make a movie and tell a story." So a couple of things there. Flynn Gray, I guess we shall expect great things. We will watch his career with great interest.
Yeah.
This
Indeed.
tells us something a little bit about the structure of the movie that's kind of interesting. That these actors are only there for part of it. This is maybe not an ensemble cast. This is a little bit more of an adventure where you have your key leads in Gosling and Gray, and it's a little bit of an odyssey. They go to a new planet or a space station or whatever, and they meet new villains, allies, etc. along the way, and that's where Matt Smith, Amy Adams, and Aaron Pierre, among the rest of the cast, come in. I thought that was kind of an interesting piece to this about what we're going to see when Starfighter comes out.
Wait,
I'm not shocked.
Grammy-winning songwriter Amy Allen is not in the movie? Gosh dang it. I'm not watching it now.
Dang it. I'm not shocked by this structure, in kind of all honesty, because, like, whenever I hear, like, big actors are going to be in, especially, like, Marvel or Star Wars or DC, like, any of the big blockbuster franchises, I always say to myself, oh, these are bit roles. They're here because they're not going to be a big deal. But you need a big actor to kind of have them remember. Like, remember a Lawrence Detective actor? What's his name?
Max von Sydow.
Max von Sydow, yeah.
Max von Sydow. You know, like, as much as, like, we all speculate, like, oh, is he Boba Fett? Is he this or that? You know, like, he's only in the movie again for 5 seconds. But I do think, in logically, yeah, you do get big actors for those small roles because they're not going to be that deep or that big, but you want to remember them for at least 5 seconds. So you get that great actor to be like, I'm here and then I'm out. You do your thing. You're kind of glorified cameo of the day. So I'm just not shocked.
It's true. I also like the way that they're approaching this the movie as truly standalone. They're not trying necessarily to set up a sequel, although it does sound like now that the movie's in post-production, feel like those conversations might be beginning. And that's where these comments that she's making about how great Flynn Gray is, I think that might be where that's coming from, where it's like, you know, they're probably watching the dailies, they're looking at the early edits, and Sean Levy's looking at Kathleen Kennedy going, you know, I bet we could do a sequel. I bet we could do something more with whatever this character's name is. And it feels like there might be a little smoke there about a follow-up.
They should. I think they should. You know, that's how you build up your universe. You know, you sometimes you do a standalone, but you kind of leave it open. If people like it and they love it, let's do a sequel. I mean, that's how the MCU started with Iron Man. They didn't know what was going to happen, and then Iron Man was a big success. Greenlight Iron Man 2.
Absolutely. So she also gave a little insight into some more of the Star Wars projects that never came to be, or rather just some of the people that she talked about doing Star Wars projects with. I wouldn't say any of these got very far. I think these are all like early conversations. Maybe a concept was kicked around and then then people moved on for various reasons. But here's what she said, quote, "I've had early conversations with David Fincher, with Vince Gilligan for TV. I've sat down with Alex Garland and others where the minute you say their name, you go, oh, that might be an interesting Star Wars. But not everybody is just going to go, oh yeah, great, I'm going to drop everything and spend the next 3 to 5 years trying to figure this out. That's the other thing to consider. These are really complicated, difficult movies to make, far more than I think people give them credit for. People have to set their lives aside for years."
That's an important thing to remember when you hear of just like so-and-so met with Lucasfilm to do a thing. Just like, yes, they met. Doesn't mean there's anything happening. It just means that people are talking and they're allowed to talk. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a Star Wars movie directed or written or produced by this person.
How dare Tony Gilroy not give up 20 years of his life, last of his life, for Andor, 5 seasons total. 12 episodes.
He should have. He should have, I say. Darn it. Yeah. And I think that's a piece of this too, is yeah, I think she hits on it there. Like, these movies are tough to make. And, you know, for as much as we could sit here and think the way, you know, Dave Filoni might have at one point in his life, wow, sure would be nice to make a Star Wars movie. You know, me, super fan, wouldn't I love to make a Star Wars movie? You know, David Fincher, Vince Gilligan, Alex Garland, these are all guys that have made a lot of really interesting, really exciting, and really good movies and shows over the years. And a lot of them are original ideas. And if I'm Vince Gilligan, right, Pluribus is one of the best shows on television right now. And that's like something that he owns. It's entirely his thing that he created. I guess Apple technically owns it, but you know, like, it's his thing. He's not fighting with canon. The only canon that exists is in his head. That's stuff that he's making up.
Right.
And I can see someone like that, or Alex Garland or David Fincher or any of the other people that she met with, being like, yeah, you know, I'm creative. I love making movies. I love making shows. I would love to make a Star Wars movie, but what else could I do in those 3 to 5 years? What else could I make? And maybe for them, that calculation, clearly for them, that calculation comes out with, I'm better off doing the other thing. I might be better off doing the other thing instead of, you know, having to fight with Disney, fight with the fans, fight with whatever to get people to buy into a weirder concept for Star Wars.
That's definitely what Benioff and Weiss came away with.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, as much as I do want to see veteran directors or showrunners, there is something, I think, as to why a lot of the time studios either pick someone like a Jon Favreau, because he's kind of in this weird position of journeyman auteur who kind of is a company guy, a Sean Levy, who's also, again, he's very effective. You know, he doesn't make the most artsy films, but he's very effective what he does. Or kind of people who are starting out, and it's like why Marvel picks these people, because like they're kind of starting out, they're young, and in some weird way, it can help jumpstart their careers more than, you know, they want to stick with that. Like Ryan Coogler is a great example for Marvel because he did Black Panther, and that's a great movie, and that made $1 billion. But Ryan Coogler doesn't want to do Black Panther and Marvel forever, and because of Black Panther kind of jumpstarting his career, he got to do Sinners, which is I heard an amazing original film. So in some ways,
excellent.
You know, obviously, I know they've had trouble with youngish directors in the past, and maybe they'll figure that out as they go along. But there is something to say about like maybe a little bit more wet behind the ears, more controllable people, but who they can jumpstart careers, and then kind of like what happened to Rian Johnson, who I know we'll get to in a second, who did Last Jedi, unfortunately got spooked a little bit, but he's now doing those Knives Out movies, and I think the world is better for that Knives Out saga.
Yeah, I agree there. I will just say about Ryan Coogler, I think I think what Marvel did was like not so much jumpstart his career, but like strap a jetpack to him and elevate him even higher. Because this dude had already done an indie darling hit with Fruitvale Station, which is a just incredible film, and then he'd gone and done a Rocky spinoff with Creed. So like he was already climbing the ladder, and then he was making his way up the ladder, and then Black Panther comes along, puts the jetpack on him, shoots him up into the stratosphere, and all of a sudden he's able to do something like Sinners, which is also excellent movie. Now back to Kathleen Kennedy. What about some of the projects that we do know about? What about the ones that have been announced, but we haven't gotten updates on it? Well, she gives us a whole bunch of updates all in a row here. This is what she says. She says, quote, I've got to tread a bit carefully here. Jim Mangold and Beau Willimont wrote an incredible script, but it's definitely breaking the mold and it's on hold. Taika's turned in a script that I think is hilarious and great. It's not just my decision, especially when I've got a foot out the door. Donald Glover has turned in a script. And as you have read, Steve Soderbergh and Adam Driver turned in a script written by Scott Burns. It was just great. Anything's a possibility if someone's willing to take a risk. Again, she circles back to some of the projects again here. This is what she says. Mangold's really on the back burner, as is Soderbergh's. I think the ones by Taika and Donald are still somewhat alive. That's really going to be up to the new team to figure out. Dave, I know that Dave and Linwin are very much on board with what Simon Kinberg is doing, and that would be a new trilogy. In the timeline of things, that takes you well into 2030 plus. So that's really what's up next.
Candy Unleashed. Let's go.
Yeah, we'll come back to Kinberg's thing in a minute. But yeah, go ahead.
At this point, I think I just it's nice to have this honesty. Also, I'm just like I'm theorizing so many things. I'm like, we haven't heard about Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy in a while. Is that just being folded into the Kinberg stuff because maybe that involves Ray? Like, I'm so many thoughts. But it's nice to have like she's pulling a James Gunn here. Like she's doing James Gunn where she's just like, yeah, okay, this and this and this and this and this. Like she doesn't care. She's on their way out the door. She doesn't give a crap. Like she's just gonna tell it all.
Yeah. And she kind of spits in Bob Iger's eye a little bit with anything's a possibility if somebody's willing to take a risk right after talking about the hunt for Ben Solo. Just a little bit of like we're just gonna poke you in the eye on the way out. But okay, so James Mangold, Dawn of the Jedi, seems to be officially on hold for the time being. From the way she talks about it, it sounds like it might be more in the Hunt for Ben Solo camp of it's not happening.
I got more the impression James Mangold was just doing so many things. He is doing a lot of stuff. He's a very busy director. That maybe it's like, maybe James Mangold wants to do his original stuff or that DC movie with then before he goes to Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, so see, they announced Mangold in 2023 at Celebration in London, right? I think if a year later, A Complete Unknown comes out, which is the Bob Dylan movie that he was working on, that comes out, that's done. His script that he's written with Beau Willimont is ready to go. From what she says here, it's an incredible script. I think if Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger call him up and say, we're ready, we want to, we're ready to go ahead. Here's our start date we have in mind for pre-production. Are you ready? I think he's there. The waiting around and dragging our heels. And I think a lot of that was because they were figuring out this succession plan. I think that might be where someone like James Mangold, who is a very accomplished director, a very in-demand director, goes, all right, I'm not waiting for you. I'm not waiting for you guys. You guys want me to do this movie? Either we start tomorrow or call me in 2 years when I'm done my other thing. And I think that's probably where we're at right now. And that is thus therefore moved the script off of the priority, out of the priority pile and into the, gee, wouldn't it be nice to do this pile, along with the Hunt for Ben Solo, which has already been blocked by Disney once.
Do you think that a lot of the weirdness around Star Wars these last 2 years, I've been talking about this on my podcast too, has been because of this transition? Because they've kind of known it's going to go from Kennedy to Filoni, Linwin, that some of these strange, not non-announced, but like move up a different movie that were never even announced in the first place. Obviously, the streaming era has been winding down since 2023. Of course, we've known that with Andor and Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. Do you think all of this is partially because of for the last 2 years they've known a transition is coming and sort of like, well, we don't really want to start a new era when the leader's about to leave, and the new guys might just throw everything in the trash. I mean, I doubt Filoni would do that, but the new guy, Dave and Linwin, are going to be here, so they're going to probably want to make their stamp on Star Wars now and say, hey, we're in charge. So it's kind of like placeholder everything.
It kind of makes you question the wisdom of that celebration announcement, like in a way. Like I know everybody, that's what we wanted going into that celebration. And maybe at the time Kennedy wasn't thinking about stepping down anytime soon. But I think you're right, Joel. I think there's a certain amount of like, that the last year in particular has been a holding pattern while they figure this out. And the reason they were able to go ahead with Sean Levy's project with the Starfighter, as she keeps saying in this interview, is because it's a one and done. That's it. That can be her swan song. She can do it and be done and get out, and then leave it to Dave and Linwin to figure out what they actually want to do next. And if they want to continue what James Mangold and Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, Taika Waititi, Donald Glover, and Dave himself were planning, they are welcome to do that. But if they think, you know what, these aren't the movies we want to go with for the direction we want to go with Star Wars, we have the option to put them back on the shelf for the time being.
You don't have the direction you're looking for.
Yeah, and like you go back to the Disney, the infamous Disney Plus Day or whatever they were calling it.
Disney
announcements
Investors
like
Day.
Disney's Investors Day, whatever the hell it was. It was clearly it's so like painfully clear now looking back on it, where they're like, oh, let's do Range of the New Republic and and a droid story and all these things that we never saw, we may never see. And it was just almost like it's clear that like Disney was like, okay, come up with 10 different titles for things. Come up with things, and that's what you're going to announce. And then you're going to do these things. This corporate mandated thing. The celebration announcement with Mangold, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, and Dave Filoni felt more like this is a confident Lucasfilm. This is a confident Lucasfilm that wasn't pressured into doing this. They were going to do this. And it could also, you can never rule out just the tardiness of Hollywood and the creative process, and just go like, yeah, they were really confident back then. Now things have changed.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that's worth bearing in mind with that is the strikes came a short time later, right? And that would have thrown a big old wrench into a lot of plans. Because I was gonna say, Ben, like you're like, oh yeah, confident Lucasfilm. I'm like, yeah, wrongfully confident because they haven't made any of these freaking movies. The two movies that are being made weren't announced on that day. They were announced afterwards. They were completely different. And so I think that there's something. Yeah, there's something odd that's gone on in that time that and I think part of it's the transition, part of it's the strikes, and part of it is they kept announcing things that were in development. And being in development and being in production are two very different things. We think of development as being like pre-production, but pre-production is later on in the process. Development is literally just writing and maybe a little concept art. Pre-production is like, okay, we're hiring dudes to build this set. Like we're going to be ready to go very, very soon. And that's something that Levy made very, very clear at Celebration Japan last year. He's like, this is not a Star Wars movie in development. It was almost like he was like telling us, like, I know you've been burned before. Mm-hmm. I know you've been burned before. Sean Levy, will not do that to you. I am going to make this movie. This is what I have done for 30 years. I have a ridiculous IMDb page with so many movies on it. You can trust me. And so he's like, this is not a Star Wars movie in development. It is a Star Wars movie in production, in pre-production. Like that, he made that distinction because I think Mangold, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, Filoni all announced when they were in development. Taika obviously announced in development. Ryan, David, and Dan announced in development. Donald Glover's movie has never really been announced. Same with Simon Kinberg's trilogy, but they are in development. Whereas, those two movies, Starfighter and Mando Grogu, have gone from development to production, and now are both in post-production, which is amazing. So hopefully something else will in the next 6 months make that jump from development to pre-production and actually be a proper Star Wars movie soon, but it seems like we're a little ways away from that. What I thought was interesting was Taika and Donald's movies. So the Lando movie and whatever Taika Waititi is that seems she almost makes it sound like maybe that's what they're deciding between for next. Like that's Lin-Win and Dave have.
It's possible.
Those are if not the only two options, those are two of the options that they could pick to go next. And now that they are in command, at the helm, they can choose from several different scripts, and one of them may be Donald's script, one of them may be Taika's script, one of them may be something we haven't heard of in the vein of Star Wars Starfighter.
I wonder. Oh, I was gonna just one speculation. If you
Yeah,
don't
go
mind.
ahead.
I wonder if they're picking those because again, it's. I mean, I'm sure it'll be great, but I do wonder if it's kind of part of that whole placeholder situation where it's like, Mando, Grogu, Starfighter, and then Taika or Orlando. They have nothing to do with each other, right? But maybe again, that's kind of that placeholder situation because I do think either Filoni, They're the Empire movie, which they didn't talk about, but I have to admit probably still happening to some extent.
Yeah.
And of course, the Kinberg thing are going to be like, this is going to be the big stamp. This is like our Avengers, our kind of like here's some fun Star Wars movie, but then the Kinberg or Heir of the Empire are going to be the Star Wars movie. This is when Star Wars becomes an event again, and not just here's a fun movie for the year.
Yeah. You guys have pointed out that the Filoni movie is not mentioned in this. I think that's the one movie that doesn't get a mention in here where I think we can safely say it's got to happen. It's not a situation where the new boss isn't going to want to do it. The new boss is the guy who would do it. So the only thing that might happen with the Filoni movie could be that just Dave suddenly feels he's too busy to direct it, in which case, Jon Favreau, come on down. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with that. And if Jon Favreau doesn't want to do it, maybe Robert Rodriguez wants to do it. And if he doesn't want to do it, Rick Famuyiwa, it's your turn. There's talent there in the Mandoverse that can easily jump in. On Kinberg's movie here, this is kind of interesting. This is what she says. She says, quote, he's working right now. He wrote something that we read in August. It was very good, but not there. We've pretty much upended the story and then spent a great deal of time on the treatment, which he finished literally about 4 weeks ago. It's very detailed treatment, like 70 pages. And so he's expected to give us something in March. And this is the trilogy that Simon Kinberg is supposedly working on.
Damn.
So, or not supposedly, is working on. So presumably 10, 11, 12, maybe it's not those numbers specifically. Maybe it's not numbered, but that's the next big event.
A trilogy written by one person all at the same time sounds good. Sounds really
yeah.
Kinberg's actually a kind of a. This is actually where I think this actually might not be a good thing because I'm not a big fan of Kinberg. His X-Men films are all to be desired. I know one of them is kind of not completely his fault because of how Josh Trank himself. And to be fair, the X-Men franchise in general under Fox was kind of dying anyway because Disney bought it and they had like leftovers and sort of like, well, just get them out so we can then put.
That's the thing. I'm not going to disagree with you, but Simon Kinberg was not the only problem with those films. Okay, they had issues, some major issues, some like there was some directors that made some really good X-Men movies, but turned out to be really bad. So
he directed one of them though. He directed the Phoenix movie. He actually directed that one. Apparently, he's not a very good director.
I don't think that's fair to hold that against him because that movie's got other issues.
That's fair, but I mean, on the one hand, so I'm kind of cautiously optimistic because it does seem like at least this trilogy will have a singular head who kind of at least knows the spine of the trilogy. Even though I'm sure there'll be changes as time goes on. You shouldn't have you gotta make some. You gotta be a little loosey goosey with your stuff. Obviously, you gotta know when to ooh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, or know when to change course after the kind of get reception of the first movie kind of thing. So I doubt he has every movie written. I just think he has a good, strong outline for the trilogy, and then maybe the first one will be completely written. But no, it's very interesting, and it is kind of a sign. I've always said, and I feel like the Ryan trilogy that never happened was also kind of a sign that Lucasfilm did learn, or maybe always knew, but Disney, kind of handcuffed them of. Yeah, we probably should have at least a singular creative over this, even if we bring in a co-writer for the second one and third one, a Kasdan co-writing with George or writing that.
I think one interesting question is if you compare the sequels with the Kinberg X-Men films. What ended up being better? And
Sequels.
it's
Sequels.
you think the
By
sequels did?
Oh God, yeah.
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 I
By a
mean,
mile.
I'm not an X-Men fan, so I don't know, like, how badly that might have caused people to stop liking X-Men.
Bad. Really bad.
But it's like, I first of all, I do think that Days of Future Past is a better movie than any of the Star Wars sequels. First of all. Now, at the same time, I think perhaps some of the other X-Men films were not as good as some of the Star Wars sequels. So I think it had higher highs and lower lows, is what I'm going to say. So I think that really what we can only hope for is that we get something like Days of Future Past and not some of these other ones.
I probably remember the X-Men franchise, and I was a fan of the X-Men franchise. Although unfortunately, one of their directors is also a terrible person. I forget his name, but he directed also the best one. So you get the original trilogy, X-Men 1, 2, and 3. The first one's okay. Everyone loves the second one. I think the second one's pretty good of that era. Kind of have to be in the mindset of the early 2000s superhero era. And the third one's got problems. It's not as bad as people say it is, but it's kind of bad. Then you get Wolverine.
That guy.
Let me pop in here. So here are the X-Men movies that Simon Kinberg worked on. Since we're going down this rabbit hole, he wrote X-Men: The Last Stand, which is X3. He produced
good.
First Class, excellent. He wrote and produced Days of Future Past,
the
excellent.
Best.
Wrote and produced Apocalypse, wrote, produced, and directed Dark Phoenix, and produced the New Mutants, which I don't think anybody saw. So we can't.
So it's 50-50. It's 50-50.
I think Kinberg this is where I'm going to compare Kinberg and Lucas, although I think Lucas is probably even better. Kinberg is that kind of guy who's like, you want him in like the producer camp, and maybe he writes the first draft, but then you bring in a Lawrence Kasdan to like tighten the script up by like all of it. That's how I kind of feel Kinberg is in terms of like his stuff.
So this is where I think it's important to now consider our chief creative officer and president.
Yeah,
right?
True.
Like,
this
is the guy who is ultimately leading things. And so he now gets, Kathleen Kennedy hired Simon Kinberg. And I do think she hired Simon Kinberg in part because he is somebody that has worked well with Dave Filoni in the past on
George
Star Wars
Lucas
Rebels.
actually had connection to Kinberg too, actually.
Yeah. Kinberg had connections there. So they bring in this guy to get the ball rolling. Now, Dave and Linwin can decide at a later date, you know what, Simon, thank you for the work that you've done, but we're going to bring somebody else in to continue this, or they can keep him on board. But this movie is going to be a creative conversation between Dave and Simon and probably a whole bunch of other creatives at Lucasfilm in the story group, other producers, the concept artists that are working on it. And yeah, as you said, Joel, whoever comes in to ultimately direct these things, that they become a big part of that conversation as well. So I think that's where a guy like Simon Kinberg is going to be really effective and really good, is that he can serve, like you said, that producer role. He can get the ball rolling on the writing process. He can be the sole writer if that's how they decide to go with it, or they can bring in somebody to punch it up later. Or maybe, Dave does a bunch of punching it up himself and just goes uncredited on it, because that's what the chief creative officer can do, sort of like the showrunner on a TV show.
Yeah, and I as long as I think I would be okay with that, and as long as also the directors are more Irvin Kershner's than Mark Wands, who are being shadow directed by George. That'd be nice too. But no, that's why he also did stuff with Rebels, although again, how much I don't know. It seemed like Dave and him were kind of co-creators, although it seemed like Dave was running the show with Rebels most of the time.
Yeah,
definitely a creative relationship there.
Yeah, I think Simon was very involved in season 1 and early season 2, and then he kind of stepped away to work on on those X-Men movies, on other and a whole bunch of other projects that he was producing at the time. You look at his filmography from sort of 2014 to 2018. There's a lot of movies on here that he was producing. So he steps away while still being available and being involved, but to a lower capacity than he was in season one. But I think again that was a good working relationship that was established. And the series finale of Rebels, there's like 6 writers credited for those 2 episodes. It's kind of ridiculous, and it's really just the people that were the creative voices behind that show, the key creative voices behind that show. They all kind of got a credit on that. Like, look, listen to this. Family Reunion and Farewell is credited to Dave Filoni, Henry Gilroy, Kiri Hart, Simon Kinberg, and Stephen Melching. That is 5
Kiri
writers.
Hart?
Exactly. Like this is clearly, and Kiri Hart, she was a big player in Lucasfilm from 2014 to 18. So like I think that like that credit and the fact that she did some writing on there is probably indicative of the amount of writing she did on the entire show. It's just for once she actually got the credit, because this episode was kind of a celebration and a send off to that creative team of Filoni, Gilroy, Hart, Kinberg, and Melching. Who were all key players in those early days.
Yeah. Also, one more thing about X-Men. The best X-Men film is Logan by James Mangold, writing and directing.
I agree with that.
Produced by Simon Kinberg.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, there we go. So we're good. That's it's not 50-50 anymore. It's 60-40. We forgot about Logan.
The
best X-Men film.
Yeah, I skipped over Logan, and I also skipped over like the Deadpool movies and stuff. Logan was a mistake. Deadpool was not.
Wait. Hold on a minute.
I love Logan. I only saw it once, but I never wanted to see it again.
No, a mistake on my part to skip over.
Okay.
Deadpool, I intentionally.
I thought you said Logan
Logan's
as
an
a
amazing
movie was a mistake.
I was about to go to war with you, Dominic.
Yeah, there would have been a civil war.
No.
Excellent. The entire
movie.
internet was
on my
come
part.
after you.
It was a mistake on my part to skip it.
Did Logan kind of, was that the first in the kind of series of like, okay, let's go back to this actor when they're older and do like that kind of trope of like, type of movies?
Yes and no. Like, yes, in the sense that it's that type of movie. No, in the sense that Hugh Jackman had only played Wolverine 3 years earlier in Days of Future Past. Like,
right, but then that also was like kind of like that too, because you had 2 Wolverines in that, right?
No, he's the only Wolverine in that. In Days of Future Past, because he's the one that goes back in time, right?
Wait, First Class, is there not a Wolverine in First Class?
No, he has a cameo as himself. There's a cameo of Hugh Jackman telling them to F off.
It's been so long, I forgot he was the one that they didn't have a younger version of when they had the younger version of like all the other ones. Okay, I guess it's just because like he seems like so old in the movie. That's why.
But it's that type of movie.
It is that type of movie.
It very much laid the groundwork for what we see now with The Last Jedi, with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, with Picard, with all that stuff. Yeah.
Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, there you go. There's another one.
That was like that. Yeah.
I hate to drag out this point just a little bit, but you brought up something, Don, which I think is important. It is going to be interesting to see with this trilogy, if it's 10, 11, 12, how much Dave wants to kind of, I don't want to sound like one of his haters, but like inject himself into this trilogy. Because, obviously Kathleen Kennedy didn't do that with the sequels because that's kind of not her strength. She's not a writer-director. And I think that, I think everyone thought she was the George of the sequels, but she isn't for different reasons. But Dave is a writer-director. And I kind of am surprised he doesn't want to do this himself, or at least be the writer-producer and then, get his Irvin Kershner's or Marquand's in to direct. And he's kind of letting Kinberg do this, or maybe by the end we'll find out it's kind of like a secret partnership where he's actually rewritten half the movie. And
he probably has a lot of trust in Kinberg because of the work that they did on Rebels. Like he probably knows him very well, and so he probably trusts him to get it right.
Also, it just occurred to me: would Dave's version of Irvin Kershner just be George? like his filmmaking mentor? Would it just be? Would
Ah,
it just be he
that's
just hired
true.
George?
That's funny.
George to direct episode 11.
That'd be
See,
funny.
now I'm picturing a Francis Ford Coppola Star Wars movie, and I'm like,
Oh my god,
that would be
Oh my God.
interesting.
be very interesting. All right, let's this Kinberg thing obviously is something again we will continue to discuss as the weeks and months go on, and years, and think in that case, because it's a ways away. 2030. How old will you be in 2030? Let's not think about that.
I don't want to think about how old I am now.
Don't
We
make
keep
me
talking about
think
things that happened
at
15
all.
years ago.
Yeah. All right. Ryan Johnson's trilogy. What the hell? What happened there? That was a big deal. I remember that day very, very vividly when it was all announced. Here's what Kathleen Kennedy said about that. Quote, once he made the Netflix deal and went off to start doing the Knives Out films, that has occupied a huge amount of his time. That's the other thing that happens here. After Sean and I started talking about Star Wars for the first time 15 years ago or 10 years ago, Stranger Things kicks in, and he is completely consumed for a while by that. And that's what happened with Ryan. And then I do believe he got spooked by the online negativity. I think Ryan made one of the best Star Wars movies. He's a brilliant filmmaker, and he got spooked. This is the rough part. When people come into this space, I have every filmmaker and actor say to me, what's going to happen? They're a little scared. This is a quote. I think Ryan Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy are friends. I think they are good colleagues who work together and probably liked working together. Ryan, for the last almost 10 years, has never said a word about being spooked by the audience. He has, in fact, gone out of his way to make the opposite point. That doesn't mean he wasn't spooked. Doesn't mean he's always telling the truth. Doesn't mean he's not doing a from a certain point of view thing. And then Kathleen Kennedy's like, yeah, no, the audience scared him. He didn't want to do it again. And she kind of
is this?
I don't think she meant.
Is she predicting?
I don't think she meant. Yeah, maybe. And I don't think she meant to throw him under the bus, but it kind of comes out as that a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. It comes out that way. I don't think she meant it that way, but this is like why I said I don't think she does many of these interviews.
Ryan could have been BSing us this whole time. Like it could literally just be like he could take it, which more power to him, because I think for him it's like, well, there's a bunch of people that hate me on the internet. I don't want to give them ammo by saying that they scared me off of doing more Star Wars movies. But also Ryan's MO, like his thing, it really feels like this stuff just rolls off of him. It doesn't seem to bother him. It never has. So it really kind of fits with his personality that he's just like, yeah, whatever. You know, a lot of people hate the movie. A lot of people like the movie. I don't care. It really based on their behavior and not nothing personal to Kathleen Kennedy, but just overall, Disney, Lucasfilm have felt very reactionary, have felt very, how they've behaved, what they've done, the things that they've greenlit and things that including the hunt for Ben Solo. Just say that. It feels like they've been reactionary, especially with the sequel trilogy. The Rise of Skywalker, I don't even get into it, okay? But the Rise of Skywalker feels like a reactionary movie to me. And all that being said, I think that's the spooking, I think, went on inside Disney Studios. I think that's what happened. And that's why we didn't get those trilogy. I think maybe unintentionally, Kathleen Kennedy's kind of passing the buck to Ryan, but I don't think it was his fault.
Yeah, do I think Ryan Johnson double checks to make sure his doors are locked at night post Last Jedi?
Oh man,
maybe. It wouldn't shock me. It would spook me certainly to have that level of vitriol from morons on the internet thrown at you constantly. It would spook any person. And I think you're absolutely right, Ben. It spooked everybody. I do think it's weird that the only person who talks about Ryan Johnson being spooked by it is not Ryan Johnson when he said the exact opposite. But again, that's neither here nor there. I think there's a little bit of a, for as brilliant a producer as Kathleen Kennedy is, I don't think she's done very many interviews in her life outside of her time at Lucasfilm. And I think that shows when she says something like that.
I don't know about Ryan, but I also wouldn't be shocked if, pretend he does get a lot of question of like, what's gonna happen to me by people who want to do a Star Wars? Because like,
Yes, true.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I mean, like, we always talk about like, oh, how Disney doesn't, do this and that with hire these people, and we should. But also, there's always part of me that's like, does Star Wars deserve good people? Does Star Wars deserve Dave Filoni, Tony Gilroy, George Lucas? Probably not. We probably deserve like the worst James Cameron if we ever want to do one. We probably deserve like the worst directors ever, quite frankly. Like we're lucky we even have talented people right in Star Wars. We kind of probably deep down in our heart of hearts knows we don't deserve good things. There's the cynic in me talking,
Speak for yourself.
Damn.
You know it to be true.
All right, final quote from the interview I thought was pretty interesting. The Deadline asked Kathleen Kennedy if she has any regrets about her time working on Star Wars, and this is what she said. She says, "Quote: No, I don't really have any regrets. Well, maybe a bit of a regret about Solo: A Star Wars Story. I brought Larry Kasdan in, and we were so excited about that idea. And then when you're into something and you realize fundamentally, conceptually, you cannot replace Han Solo, at least for now. As wonderful as Alden Ehrenreich was, and he really was good and is a wonderful actor, we put him in an impossible situation. And once you're in it, and once you're committed, you have to carry on. I think I have a bit of a regret about that, but it's not about the movie making and filmmaking. I don't have regrets about that. I just think that conceptually, we did it too soon."
I'm going to agree.
Wow.
I'm going to agree with that. With that because, there was always something, it's weird because I love the prequels, but there is kind of something weird about you kill Han Solo and then you're going to want to do a prequel series of his young life. I guess with the like you even waited 10 years with the prequel before we did that. It's kind of like that. There's kind of that, we're still kind of on, we got Han Solo played by Harrison Ford, and I love Alden, of course, but I do think we have to take in mind Han Solo is beloved. A good chunk of it is because of Harrison Ford. I don't think you can completely separate the actor from the character, at least at that moment. Maybe now you can, to some extent, because we're kind of moving past that. But it'd be like, hey, let's recast Hayden Christensen for Ahsoka. It's like, no, we haven't gotten past that point yet, especially with Hayden being so young and still. This is the perfect time for that now.
Well, I don't usually do this, but I would invite anyone to go back and listen to an older episode of the Star Wars Underworld podcast, specifically pre the trailer release of Solo: A Star Wars Story. During the production of that movie, we were not on board with that idea. I remember having very intense conversations about how we thought it was a bad idea, that Solo: A Story was a bad idea. We were wondering why they were doing this. And it's funny for me in retrospect, because I think, honestly, Solo might be my favorite Star Wars movie of the new bunch. Honestly,
pretty good.
I love that movie. I love that movie. So it worked out for me, and I think in retrospect, I think Solo is only going to, when you get past all of the behind the scenes drama, you look at it as just at face value. I think it's only going to grow in a cult following, but it is a misstep. It's always going to be there. It's a stumbling block for Kathleen Kennedy herself, because it was this big thing of hiring somebody and then firing them and then going all this and then reshooting the damn thing, and just like, yeah, it wasn't a great situation. And like the stuff that she knows, the stuff that to be a fly on the, to know all the dirt that happens behind the scenes of that movie that we will never know. Or maybe, I don't know, when does your NDA run out, Kathleen Kennedy? I want to know. Hey, open invitation, come here, let's talk.
I think it was Solo. Again, this is what I was saying. Like there was a failure to manage up, because there's very clearly there was a very clear mandate from Disney to do more Star Wars movies faster, and this was an idea that they were excited about. They went with it. It sounds very corporate friendly, like we're doing the Adventures of Young Han Solo. Just say that to anybody at any point other than 2018, and your odds are people go, yeah, that sounds great. I'll be there for that. You say that to somebody in 2007, they're like, sure, sounds great, I'm there. But then it was like every bet that they made with that movie, they bet wrong. Like they lost that I don't know if the house won on that, but every bet was they bet wrong. They bet wrong that audiences wanted a new young Han Solo. They didn't. They bet wrong on releasing it in May. They should have pushed it to December, as they had done with the other Star Wars movies up until that point. And they definitely should have done it after they decided to change the directors. Again, I would argue that they bet wrong, because Kathleen Kennedy had to choose at that moment. Did she go with Phil Lord and Chris Miller and their vision for this movie, or did she go with the Kasdan's vision? And she chose the Kasdan's. And we can sort of pin it on Larry if we want, because he's got the experience of writing various Star Wars movies. So why wouldn't you go with him? Mm-hmm. And yeah, they are friends. You can say that, Joel. But I think they were pinning it on Jonathan Kasdan, because he was supposed to be a big part of their other plans for more Star Wars stuff beyond just Solo, whether it was Solo sequels and spinoffs, or he wrote a treatment for a version of Indiana Jones 5 that ultimately didn't happen, and the Willow Show, which anybody want to watch it? Too bad if you do, because it's not available on Disney Plus anymore. Whereas Phil Lord and Chris Miller have just gone on to do hit after hit after hit after hit. So you kind of think you probably should have gone with them and trusted their vision for the movie, and maybe you wind up with something better. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's even worse. Maybe the situation is even worse. But in retrospect, it looks like every point where there was an option to pick something that might have been better for the movie. And this is no disrespect to Ron Howard and what he did with it, or what the final product of the movie itself is. They chose the wrong option with that one, and it did create a little bit of I do think a little bit of a spin out for Star Wars, where they weren't able to react for a little bit.
And they doubled their budget.
Yeah,
Solo
and the Acolyte both have the same problem, which is they both suffer from not getting a follow-up. I think because they're both setups. Like, the Acolyte season 1 was a setup for the actual plot, and Solo is also a setup for the actual plot. And so I think the biggest mistake from Solo was not making it. It was also not changing the directors. It also was not putting it out 6 months after you had a Star Wars movie that got some mixed reviews, or putting it out at the same time as like a Marvel movie and a Jurassic movie and a bunch of other Pixar movie and all this. The biggest mistake was not making a Solo 2, because there's no way that a Solo 2 would have had that perfect storm of things making it perform as poorly as Solo. Like, I think Solo 2 would have been a Rogue One level spin-off movie, and I think people would have gone bananas for it. And I think having a story that had even more focus on Kira and Maul would have been so interesting, and I think people would have been all for it. And I think the same thing about the Acolyte. I think Acolyte season 2 would have been amazing. It would have gotten even more people on board with the show, and would have made season 1 look more popular in retrospect, and watched more times to make their money back. And that's my feeling, is that the biggest mistake was not making Solo or changing the directors. It was not letting a second movie happen, when that it was clearly not a one and done standalone. It was part of like a duology or a trilogy, just like Acolyte season 1 is not a one season show. It does not make sense as a one season show.
I disagree, because I think, I love the Maul Kira show. I don't think could have cared less about seeing more alternate Rai Han Solo, because I think he's the least interesting part of that movie. And
That's why.
But I don't even think getting a sequel would have been interesting, because I don't think Han Solo is that interesting until you get to him meeting Luke and Leia. I honestly wouldn't even call it Solo 2. I just call it Kira and Maul, a Star Wars story. No, I wouldn't have called it that.
The follow-up was actually a Mos Eisley Cantina movie.
There we go.
That Han and Chewie, apparently, this was the reports at the time, wouldn't have showed up until about halfway through.
Which that would have been really popular. That would have been a slam dunk. Rest in peace.
Maybe.
Hey, so there it is. That's Kathleen Kennedy's exit interview. There's more to it. You can certainly read the whole thing on Deadline. But I think those are the key points from this as she begins the process of reflecting on her time as Lucasfilm president, while also giving us a little glimpse into the crystal ball of what might be coming next from her successors, her handpicked and hand-groomed successors. Let's take a minute here and actually talk about what we plan to talk about this week, which is the shakeups coming to Galaxy's Edge. This was announced this week in a story in the LA Times that the California Galaxy's Edge, at the very least, is getting a little bit of a makeover. It's going to be moving away, not entirely, but moving away at least somewhat from its sequel trilogy origins and moving more into a Return of the Jedi original trilogy era focus. So Darth Vader and Imperial Stormtroopers are going to replace Kylo Ren and the First Order Stormtroopers. Han Solo and Princess Leia will be brought in as characters. Characters like R2-D2, Rey, Ahsoka, Din, Grogu, and Chewie will all continue to be part of it. They'll be renaming some of these shops and stalls, including First Order Cargo, which is getting changed to Black Spire Surplus. There'll be Rebel and Imperial themed items added to the shop, which kind of there already are. It's just Resistance and First Order. And they will be in terms of the music that you can hear in the park, which has largely been original compositions, including some by John Williams, will now include scores, music from the soundtracks of the first 6 films, and the classic Cantina Band track will now be featured in August Cantina, which it basically was. It was just like the hip hop remix
version thing,
which is pretty freaking awesome. I gotta be honest, that version of the song, that remix is stellar. It's really good, but they are now going to at least work into the rotation the classic version of it. Joel, this is the reason we brought you on to talk about this.
Yes.
That was the actual goal, and then Dave Filoni,
This is the top story this week.
and
How dare you.
Kathleen Kennedy changed their mind, or decided to make some announcements and change the whole plan of the show. So, throwing it right to you, give us your thoughts on these changes coming to Galaxy's Edge.
I think my thoughts can be best described through this little thread on Blue Sky, which I'm going to read to you from my favorite reviewer, the Movie Bob. I don't agree with most of the Disney has only made mistakes with Star Wars takes, but if there's an original sin in their management, it's that they started out assuming everyone would care way too much about timeline consistency for park immersions, and it complicated everything. Like, I firmly believe the sequels are like they are, is at least 65 to 70% because the mouse absolutely needed original Star Wars-esque stuff to be prominent at the parks, but also the parks to be current to the movies. And no, guys, no one gives a shucks about that. Seriously, it's like thinking kids are going to have a spell broken because Chip and Dale are 6 inches tall next to Mickey and Donald. No, they'll be fine, so long as the heads don't come off. That's not how kids work. People wouldn't have cared that 77 stormtroopers were near new backdrops. And I think he's right, because I think this was inevitable. I think that, look, I think as hardcore Star Wars fans who do podcasts like us, the idea of a completely canonical in-universe land with a story, with like a canonical story, is really cool and really interesting. But it's the same problem you have with the Star Cruiser, although Star Cruiser was like that times 20, which is most people don't care about any of that. They like, this is where you're right, Dominic. They don't care about ABY, BBY, CBS, NBC, LMNOP, Z, whatever. They don't care about that. They don't care about
Joel. I have been told by many people that ABY, BBY is very important to them. So I don't know.
But they don't care about that. They want, most people don't even call Galaxy's Edge. We call it Star Wars Land, right? And look, Galaxy's Edge is beautiful. I've been there. We've all been there now. It's a beautiful place. I felt like I was with my people when I was there. It's like the immersion is great. But also there's a part of me that's like, but I kind of want to take a picture with Darth Vader. I want to take a picture with the Emperor, get a Thrawn meet and greet. What about prequel fans? If Dan Grievous is in the chat or listens later, You telling me he's not gonna come to here all the way and just take a meet and greet with General Grievous and the Separatist Council and take their pictures? Like I would do there with him.
I think that would kill Dan. Actually, I think Dan would just drop dead if the Separatist Council and General Grievous were there, and he could take a picture. He would do
their autographs.
He would die and go to heaven.
Exactly. And I think this was kind of inevitable that they would have to give up some of this to some extent anyway. And I think it's fine. I mean, there's still gonna be sequel stuff. I don't think it'll be original trilogy forever, although, yeah, it's the 50th next year, so, got to get that ready to go.
Yeah.
And, the parks have always been marketing gimmicks. I mean, the thing that people don't understand about Disney, they're not a movie studio. They're a park business. The movies create the content to put in the parks. It's the cycle. That's where they make the real money from.
Circle of life.
Exactly. That's where they make the real money, from the parks and the real estate and the big money. So that's how they stay in business even during strikes. So this is inevitable. I'm sure they'll even add Starfighter characters if that's a success. They'll just keep updating it and stuff and like that. So I think people are a little maybe upset. Like I love the sequel too, but come on, guys. I think this is what is needed.
Yeah, it was always odd to me that they locked it in so specifically into any time period, because it was so of that moment. It was so of 2019 that it always felt like change was going to be inevitable, and it was always a matter of how are they going to do the change, because it feels like they couldn't keep that going forever. And I do think that is something where and like you said, I love Galaxy's Edge. I've been many times, and I will deeply miss it for the foreseeable future. But it has always been odd in the way that it was pitched and promoted and then executed upon, because this idea of making it one day in the Star Wars galaxy, okay, that's kind of cool, that's kind of a neat idea, but it does limit what you can do. It does limit your ability to really draw people in. And so the thing that they were supposed to be like this like thing where you go and you like live it, and all the cast members are in character and they have their own backstories that they've written for themselves, all this stuff. They just kind of did a shit job at that. And I'm not hating on the cast members, on the workers. Like, I mean, Disney, like I remember going there ready to have this experience. And then you got there and this became a bigger deal more recently with the Jenny Nicholson's Starfighter, Star Cruiser video. But like the game that you could play, the immersive thing you could do was scan a QR code, and then you got like a pre-written message from Rose or some other character, and it wasn't exciting. It didn't have that level of immersion that they had promised us, that they had suggested that it would. And so as its time has gone on, the park has already become more and more this sort of like general catch-all Star Wars thing, and I think they just need to embrace that even further and just say, yeah, you know what, Darth Vader's over there, Din Djarin's over here, Rey's over here, Darth Maul's over there. Like just embrace it fully. Like forget this idea that it needs to be in canon. You've written stories for Batuu, that's great. Batuu is a place that we can read about in books and comics. Now let's just make it into a fun theme park experience, because I still think that like the gold standard for a theme park is the Harry Potter land. And they went for accuracy with what you saw on screen and fun things to do. And well, that's another park I won't be going to again anytime soon for different reasons. It's well, kind of the same reasons. It was like you walked in there and it was really like you felt like you were part of that. You were having a really fun Harry Potter experience, and Galaxy's Edge comes really close to that, but it doesn't quite go all the way there. It comes up just a little bit short, because there was like this promise that they never fulfilled of immersion, and then because they took half measures on that, they never quite embrace the let's just do fun Star Wars thing side of it, which is have Darth Maul, Darth Vader, Rey, Luke, Han, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Din, Ahsoka, Omega, whoever, Kazuda, Ezra, like have all of them all running around at the same time. And that I think is more what they need to embrace. And look, when the immersion stuff worked, when it worked really well. Chris, I think you and I were there one time, and Ray is like gathering everybody together for a secret training mission where we're gonna practice running away from the First Order, and Chewie is gonna be the First Order, and like Ray's like, all right, everybody run this way. We all run this way, and then she's like, all right, run that way. We're like, run that way, and like we just bought into it. We're like, yeah, fuck it, screw it. We're in this. We're gonna run around. We're having a grand old times. Little kids though, they truly bought into it. Like Ray was like, come on, this way, we gotta hide. And this little girl dove into a bush. And Ray's like, youngling, no, you can't go in there. It was brilliant. If you remember watching the podcast, I did a hit from the podcast from Galaxy's Edge, I think last year or 2 years ago. And the stormtroopers came up and they like invaded the show for a minute. That was pretty great. I was there one time. I had my Ahsoka shirt on, and V Marathi walks up to me. She's just like, doesn't have anything else to do. She just comes up to me. She's like, any friend of Ahsoka's a friend of mine, and shakes my hand and then keeps going. I was like, that was awesome. and I got into an argument with Chewie one time because he was like, he didn't like that I was wearing a Boba Fett shirt. Like, all of this stuff is great. Like, that part was really good when it worked, but it didn't work a lot of the time. It wasn't there most of the days. Like, I had to go a lot of time to build up those experiences, and so I think the best thing to do is just embrace, hey, let's just do fun Star Wars things like all of those, and forget the like true like immersion, it's a story, it's a day in the universe side, and like let's just do fun Star Wars things.
Yeah, I'm shocked that, I mean, it kind of makes sense because it takes a lot of planning. Like, theme parks take a lot of planning. You can't just make something happen. There's all this logistics involved and approvals involved. So it's not too surprising to me that, like, it's always lagging behind where Star Wars is currently. And so, but it still feels like that this decision should have been made a lot longer ago than now. Because, when Galaxy's Edge opens, it's where the Star Wars universe and Star Wars fandom was like 3 or 4 years prior to that.
Yeah.
That's where it was at when everybody was thinking that The Force Awakens was going to be the launching off point for 90% of Star Wars we were about to get, and so it made sense at that time, but you could even tell when Galaxy's Edge opened that, oh, this isn't quite where Star Wars is going. This feels a little bit off because the future of Star Wars is not related to Black Spire. It is not related to this spot in the timeline. And they tried to bridge that a little bit by bringing Mando and Grogu in to there, which already was messing with the timeline by doing that. And so I would have thought that maybe when they made that decision, they would have brought more in other than just Mandalorian stuff. But it's very clear now, now that, we're still waiting to find out when the Rey movie's gonna happen. And, the really only thing in that era in production is Starfighter, and that's still very loosely connected to that. Like, it just seems very out of place. Like, it taking place where it does at the time, it seems very out of place when the future of Star Wars is very much in Mando and Grogu and Ahsoka, and also a lot of dark time stuff like Andor and Maul and such. So it makes a lot of sense they're expanding it now. It's shocking that they took this long to make this decision.
It kind of feels that theory of yours, Chris, and I always hate saying this because I sound like such a grifter. I sound like such a hater. Where it's like, yeah, the sequels being Disney Star Wars. Where I do feel like, yeah, maybe that was kind of what Disney was hoping for, but Lucasfilm was like, we kind of want to build off our Clone Wars thing and our Mandoverse thing and our Dark Time thing because that's where our comfort zone is, and we like that a little bit more. and I love the sequels, and I always hate saying that because I know a lot of people love those two, of course, and they're just as valid.
They could have as easily. I mean, again, it comes down to the fact of Disney did not expect The Mandalorian to be the thing that moved Star Wars forward. Like, it was an experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like, oh, we're going to make a live action show. It's going to be kind of shorter like the Clone Wars, but it's going to be live action. It's going to have Clone Wars influences and Dave Filoni in it. They did not expect it to catapult Disney Plus into competition with Netflix. Like, that was not an expectation of theirs. And I think it was that completely just changes the trajectory because, we're there watching Rise of Skywalker. And at the same time, Mando season 1 is coming out, and at that point, we did not realize that one would be the end of an era, and what would be the beginning of another era. Like, we did not have that feeling at that time. Then the pandemic happens. Then all the other movies are pushed back. Then all we have is streaming. Then everybody's watching everything that comes out on Disney Plus and everything that comes out on Netflix and Hulu and Peacock and all these million other things. And then all of a sudden, it very quickly becomes clear that, tying the park into the movie universe exclusively. Yeah, that didn't end up being the best decision. Did they know it at the time? No, but they could have corrected faster. I think that's the only point, is they could have corrected it faster. They could have not just brought in Mando and Grogu in there, but they could have also said, okay, we're just going to bring in Andor and all the stuff on Disney Plus and Siege of Mandalore and like everything in there right away. They could have done that way sooner than now.
Well, yeah, and the fact that it's Black Spire Outpost, the fact that they went to all the trouble of creating this whole new world, this whole new planet of Batu, is genius in a way. It is genius in the way that it's very malleable to whatever they want to do with it. Whether that be, because a lot of people have thrown this criticism around of, it's like, why didn't they just make it Tatooine? Florida's kind of like Tatooine in like in climate. So why didn't they just do that? Or why didn't they just do something that
should have been Dagobah if it's Florida.
That's true.
So true.
That's even better point.
Tatooine for California, because we're desert, really.
But they really wanted to have their own planet, Disney's own planet, basically, to go, okay, we can do whatever we want with this, and we can tie it in with different things. I think that was always the plan to, okay, now it's sequel trilogy stuff. And like, you have Rise of the Resistance. That's obviously not going anywhere. That's always going, unless they retheme it, which would be dumb at this point because, it's so new. But the rest of it is like pretty vanilla in a way that it can be just changed to whatever. So it's actually, as you're saying, Chris, like, it's weird it's taking them this long. That kind of hit me when this news came out. Like, wow, we haven't had Vader in the park. Not since his not since he was dancing at Hyperspace Hoopla have we seen Darth Vader walking around at Disney parks. So it's very weird that now we're finally getting that, and I think rightfully so. People are very excited about this, and I understand people are maybe a little miffed that sequel stuff isn't, but it's had its play, and it's still going to be there, and now they're going to have more stuff in it. I say, my personal opinion, make it like Lego Star Wars. Just throw everything into. We all love. Who else loved playing Lego Star Wars 2 and Lego Star Wars 1, walking around the cantina, and then you'd bump into Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then all hell would broke loose, and just like everyone would start killing each other. Like, make that Galaxy's Edge. Like, have a face-off between Kylo Ren and Darth Vader. Make that happen.
I find it fascinatingly funny how pre-Disney, under Lucas, Disney parks were completely silly with Star Wars. Dance Dance Revolution and like the little kitty lightsaber teaching thing, which was cute. Then Disney buys it, And you know, people are always like, "Oh no, are they going to Disney-fy Star Wars?" Blah blah blah.
Exactly.
They always go like Disney always goes the complete opposite direction. It's like, no, we're going to take Star Wars seriously with canon and ABY and BBY matters, and it's like we're going to be like almost uber serious with this, and like it was with the opposite direction. And you know, look, when it comes to like the movies and stuff like that, yeah, I want that. When it comes to Disney parks, man, I just want like the Disney villain bash off where it's like, here's Maleficent and Jafar. I think it's Darth Vader and the Emperor and Green Goblin. They're all dancing and like having a wicked time together, and then they fight the heroes.
I just need to know, Joel, what year ABY did Sneakanoopala's Hyperspace Hoopla take place in? That's what I really need to know.
That's the real question. That's the real question. And look, I completely understand the Imagineers and the creators behind, which there were many of. Not just from a corporate perspective, like the actual artists, the people that made Galaxy's Edge, that created that story, that were really put their heart and soul into it. That idea, like kind of almost like a really big DM for a giant, a game of Dungeons and Dragons, like someone that's really focused on the details. Because we're like you're saying, Joe, like they came at this, we're like, we're going to get this right. We're not going to half-ass this. We're not going to come at this and be like, oh, it's just Star Wars land. Like, no, this is the big deal. We're going to do this right. We're going to make sure it's canon. We're going to make sure people feel like they're in the real world. And I understand that. But I think at this point, it's okay to let off that gas a little bit. It's okay. We've had the fun. Let's have some fun. Let's have things and let's change things out. And I really hope in the near future, there's a part of this where we see clone troopers walking around Galaxy's Edge. We see maybe they can work out some weird thing with battle droids and have B1 battle droids walking around, or or just like re-theme it to Starfighter or whatever the next trilogy is going to be. Like, let it evolve, let it grow, because I think that's one of the disappointments I've had with Galaxy's Edge is that it kind of like it was there, and then we had Rise of Resistance, and then it's just kind of like stagnated. And as much as I would be there every day if I could, it's not encouraging to be like, well, I'm not really missing anything. I've seen it. I've seen Galaxy's Edge, but there's nothing new there. And this is something new, and there always is room for more stuff. So I think this is a step in the right direction. And I think it's going to be really cool. I think this stuff plays really well on social media. Imagine people having experiences with, you've seen the viral, the guy getting roasted by a stormtrooper. If there's one Jedi left, you're not him, and just like that whole thing. Like, imagine people getting roasted by Darth Vader. I'm imagining they're going to have like AI Darth Vader voicing him or something like that. So that's going to be interesting.
Well, they did get James Earl Jones' voice, so I mean, I am 100% ready for Darth Vader to do this to me, and I am 100% going to go. Yes, my lord. My lord.
As you should.
Yep. Force choked out. Yeah. All right. I think that's as good a place as any to end it, and let's begin to wrap things up for this week.
Wow, we actually had kind of a lengthy show. Like, I remember the days when there were
stories.
I know.
Two topics. That was it. It was gonna be a short show. I think I told you, Joel. I'm like, no big deal. It's gonna be a short show. Just come on. It'll be no big deal. We'll knock it out in an hour. No big deal.
The two very big stories. So that's been
a lot of summarize discussion. All my thoughts on Ion Can on Monday when we talk about it again.
That's right. Yes. You can follow us at the SWU. Catch another show next week. Dominic, thank you for hosting.
It was my pleasure as always. This was great fun. Good luck, Dave. Good luck, Linwin. Thank you, Kathy. Can't wait to do all this again in 7 days' time.
Heck yeah. Follow Dominic on social media at DominicJ25. Ben, thank you for hosting.
Oh, it was a pleasure as always. And if for some reason you haven't got enough of what's coming out of my mouth right now, the Intergalactic Peace Coalition podcast is back, ladies and gentlemen. And we did a catch-up episode. I have not edited it yet, but the current runtime is 3 hours and over 30 minutes. Because we tackled the top 5 most anticipated films of 2026. You can guess which one is my number one. You can guess. Figure it out for yourself. It's Devil Wears Prada 2. Haha, gotcha.
Wait, there's a Devil Wears Prada 2? Okay, now I'm excited.
Yes.
I didn't even know that.
But
Nice.
yes. But also we had to, myself and Zach had to explain like where the hell we've been the past few months when we haven't been releasing episodes. I went to Hawaii, he went to Mexico City, we did a deep dive on that, and then also, our goal is to release more episodes in 2026 than we did in 2025, which is more than 3.
Oh, it's doable. Especially if you do a review of Devil Wears Prada 2.
Well, you gotta go do an episode the week before the movie comes out where you review Devil Wears Prada 1.
Oh, then absolutely.
Wait, you haven't done that yet? Oh my goodness.
Are you assuming that I haven't seen Devil Wears Prada 1 500 times already? Well, you would be correct.
Oh, you see, now we've been talking about it, I did see paparazzi of Anne Hathaway on that set. Now that I think about it, but I had to bury that memory. I see so many photos from people on sets. I just forget most of them. I did know that.
On the Intergalactic Peace Coalition podcast, will you be covering the biggest TV show of the end of 2025? The Crave original series, Heated Rivalry?
Well, I guess we have to now, don't we?
Oh my goodness.
We've covered crazier things. You know that for a fact, so...
Wow.
Oh, I'll tune into that one.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Very intriguing. You can follow Ben on social media at Ben Hart with no E. And follow IPC as well at IPC Pod, I think. Something like
you got it.
Something like that. Yeah, check it out. Joel, thank you for being on. Thank you for your patience and waiting 2 hours to talk about the topic that you want to talk about.
Oh, no, it was my pleasure, and I just hate to say it, but I feel like when Ben was talking about his most anticipated films, I gotta be honest, I sometimes feel like I might be cheating a little bit on Star Wars, because, like, Supergirl, man, that movie kind of taken my heart, and it's also so close to my birthday, too. So, that if it's not number 1, it's definitely number 2, and going back and forth, I'm just saying. But yeah, I was so happy to be here. I did not expect to talk about probably the biggest news of 2026 for Star Wars, definitely. But I've always had a lot of thoughts on this anyway, so it's been a lot of fun. Check us out on Ion Cannon. Next week we're going to talk about what Matthew calls Tuckerizations, where it's kind of Star Wars self-inserts, like how Chris Kimshaw is Beaumont Kim for Rise and Fall of Galactic Empire, and how a bunch of other Star Wars creators are kind of inserting themselves into Star Wars through their creativeness. And who would we want to be as Star Wars characters? What would our jobs be? So that's going to be fun. We'll talk about all this and more Mondays, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, 8:30 p.m.
I remember it broke my brain the first time somebody pointed it out to me that the main character's name was Luke, and that's short for Lucas, as in George Lucas. I was like, what? Oh my God. Blew me away.
I know, right?
I just realized like this week that the person in Supergirl is also the person in House of Dragon. I'm like, oh, that's the same actor. She looks so different. That's the same actor. That is going to be for sure an interesting movie as well. Not as interesting as Devil Wears Prada 2, but that might be a second. Of course.
Can't get them all.
Yeah, fascinating. You can follow Joel on Blue Sky, JID 20234.bsky.social. That's right. That's how
Blue Sky, you gotta work on these damn usernames, guys. Please, Blue Sky. Come on, man.
And that's if you are in a state where Blue Sky is illegal to access as well.
Gee, I wonder how that is.
If not, you'll just have to tune in to Ion Canada, which thankfully is legal everywhere. Still, we hope that it still is.
Fighting the good fight.
Check that out. Check out all the other shows on the Star Wars Underworld Network as well. The Raeside, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more. And make sure you head over after this to the Star Wars Underworld Network Discord to continue the discussion. What's going on, Joel, tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, we are hopefully going to be able to watch The Mandalorian episodes 3 and 4.
Nice.
If all and maybe 5 if the technology doesn't betray us. Because we are doing a Mandalorian rewatch before the movie, and might I just say for everybody, try and rewatch The Mandalorian. If you remember, because you will remember why you love these characters, and why even after season 3 was a little bumpy, I still want to see these 2 guys have adventures, and because I love these guys so much. Diddy Grogu.
That first episode's still a banger. Still a banger.
Awesome. So make sure you join the Discord. Links in the description. Make sure you subscribe and review if you're listening to the show. Punch the subscribe button if you're watching it on YouTube. Thanks to everybody who keeps us going by super chatting occasionally. It's just enough to pay for things to keep things going. So we really still appreciate anyone who does. And then anybody who's a channel member as well. That's a huge part of keeping everything going as well. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate y'all in the TK squad over there. All right, we'll be back next week. But until then, for Joel and Ben and Dom, my name is Chris, and may the Force be with you.
It's a wrap.